Hello and welcome to the Work for Change podcast. I am your host, Jean Glaude. I am obviously not here with my brother. Now, today's episode is kind of different, episode 71 of the Work for Change podcast. This episode is going to be a little bit different. Again, Jean is not going to be here, and the interview that you guys are going to be listening to was actually not supposed to be for the podcast. Now, I'm sure everyone knows that COVID-19 has become a pandemic, and it has definitely affected our lives. It's affected everyone's lives. And we just honestly were not able to make a podcast happen this week, but we still wanted to put something out there. And something that I've always thought would be kind of cool would be the interviews that I do on my YouTube channel. I've always thought that they could be cool podcasts because a lot of times it's just me talking with someone. So this week, I actually had the absolute pleasure of being on Ethan Suplee's podcast, American Glutton. So I drove to LA earlier this week. It was actually last week, and we were able to film a podcast with him. And after that, I was able to actually interview him and kind of just talk about some things that I've actually wondered, because if you don't know who Ethan is, so he was in Boy Meets World. He was the bigger bully in that show. He was in Remember the Titans. He's been in American History X. His most recent movie is called The Hunt. It's actually out in theaters right now. He's been in so many movies and so many TV shows. My Name is Earl as well. He's someone that I've watched my entire life, really. And so it was a really cool experience being able to go up there and film with him and talk with him and speak with him about a bunch of stuff. And I'm really excited for you guys to hear this interview that I did with him. Now, I do want to say, again, this was not supposed to be a podcast, so the audio quality is not very good. I just filmed it with my camera and the little onboard mic that I have on it. It's like a little Rode mic. So I apologize about that. Again, that was not the plan with this interview. It was supposed to just be kind of part of another YouTube video that I was making. But I do think that people that like the podcast will like the interview. But again, I do apologize for that. I know that everyone is kind of dealing with this, and I really do think that moving forward, we'll be able to make sure that we have regular podcast episodes up. I know that obviously everyone has a little bit more free time, especially if you've been told to not work right now and your gym's closed down. All the gyms around me are closing down. So I think it's a very interesting time, and it's a time right now. We're in a time right now in America and honestly in the world that we're all going to remember for the rest of our lives. And that is scary, but it's also kind of cool. And I'm saying that with the most respect that I can, but this is something, we're going to survive. I don't believe it's the end of the world. And so we're going to be able to look back on this and be like, wow, that was a crazy time. 2020 was an absolutely insane year. And I'm glad that we were able to get through it. But, being in the middle of it right now, it is scary. There's a lot going on. And so hopefully this podcast will hopefully be able to let you escape from that just a little bit, and you'll be able to listen to it. So thank you guys so much for listening to episode 71 of the Work for Change podcast. So we just finished the podcast, and we went over on time, so we have to do this quick. But I wanted to, I'm sure most people that are watching this video kind of know your story. And so I kind of wanted to go into things that I've wanted to ask you, sure, and that are interesting to me. Yeah. So for me, something I've talked a lot about is that when I was heavier, I made myself the funny fat guy. Yeah. Right? You literally were that. Yeah. In movies and in these shows that I watched, that's the character that you're portrayed. And so I think I've heard you talk about a little bit about this, but when you decided to lose weight, or when you did lose weight, were you afraid of that persona disappearing,
It's really weird because I did play that a number of times in movies and on TV, but I think I was never that in real life. I would build up barricades, and I almost think being an actor was another barricade to, now when you look at me, you're just gonna see an actor who was in a movie, and maybe you'll associate that, and so you're not gonna, I developed a scowl as a kid to look mean so that other kids wouldn't call me fat, I think, because they'd look and, oh, he looks tough and angry, and you don't want to necessarily mess with that guy. And then it was, like a shirt at the beach would hide me, a white t-shirt, and then I'd go in the water and come out and think I'm safe because I have this white t-shirt on, even though that's what they, that's a whole thing of a white t-shirt is basically non-existent.
Yeah.
I had friends who were actors, and I would feel more comfortable around them because the attention is going to go to them, not to me. And so I think being an actor was another diversion. So I never felt like the funny guy, and I never had a sense that I would lose that. I think I've always actually been more comfortable doing dramatic work. And so that was never something I even really thought about.
Without you even knowing it, but you've probably made a lot of people like when I was a younger kid and I was overweight, made me feel better about it. You know what I mean? Because I was able to see you in movies and you're popular, or you're in these movies and people think you're funny, and it's okay, if I won't be able to be the jock that's gonna get all the girls because I'm great at football, but I can for me it turned into I made fun of myself a lot.
Yeah.
So with you developed this scowl that made people afraid to make fun of you. For me, people didn't have to make fun of me because I was already doing it.
Right.
And that's
all a deflection.
It's all
right?
a deflection.
Yeah.
And that had its own negatives because I started to believe everything I would tell myself. I would just think I was kind of worthless. I would just think that all of these things that I'm telling myself were true. But this isn't about me.
But I think what you're saying is super valid. I think it's, even with the girl I'm married to, we have a bunch of kids, right? When we first got together 20 years ago, there was never a conversation about my weight. And when I finally did break and go, it was all part of I'm going to lose her if I don't do something about this, but I'm also terrified to talk to her about it because she hasn't brought it up. So, some delusion that she's unaware that I'm 500 pounds, you know what I mean? Even though that's not rational or possible, I thought if I bring it up to her, it makes it real. And so I think the most vulnerable I've ever been in my whole life was that conversation with her. And she was really cool about it and kind of yeah, I'll help you. We can figure this out, But I think it's constantly deflecting, and it's completely irrational. Some people wear their unhealth inside with cholesterol or whatever and you don't see it. You and I had it on the outside. It's obvious. Here, you can all see what we're doing to ourselves. And so we have to figure out ways to deflect because we're knowingly, whether we understand the science or not, I knew on my third cheeseburger, I shouldn't be having this third portion of food. I knew that and I felt guilty about eating it. The reward that I would get, whether it's dopamine or what, I don't know, or just the sensation of controlling this food as I'm eating it outweighed my obesity at the time. The guilt I felt wasn't sufficient to get me to stop, but I think all of the weird social things that I built up, being an actor was certainly part of it. Making sure I traveled in groups of people was all deflections of let's not confront this aspect of me that's so obvious, truly the elephant in the room.
Did you ever feel and I'm not sure, this might have been subconscious, looking back, maybe you feel this way, your size, you're no, I kind of need to be this size because I'm obviously getting cast as these things, so it's good that I'm this weight.
My first job professionally as an actor was Boy Meets World, and something happened between season 1 and season 2 where my agents got a call from the producers, and the producer said hey, he doesn't need to gain weight for this role. I wasn't aware that I was gaining weight. Yeah. They could see it and they were going I hope he's not doing this for us because he doesn't need to do that. I never once, I guess there was a point in time, on My Name is Earl where I had the thought, like, I don't need to be skinny. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. I gained weight during My Name is Earl. Like, I started that, I think, just under 300 pounds. And then 4 or 5 years later was around 400 pounds. So I know I like relaxed and was like, well, they hired a big guy because 300 pounds, I'm still a big guy, but I was much smaller, you know.
Yeah.
I don't know. I never really thought I need to be big. When I put my mind to it and lost a ton of weight, that was not a concern. I mean, that's still not a concern. Like, if I'm not allowed to I have a movie coming out Friday, by the way, so it's not, I was a little heavier in it. I was probably 30 pounds heavier than I am now. But I'm still much smaller than I've been.
Yeah.
I don't know. If I'm not allowed to act anymore, if I lose 10 more pounds, which is kind of my goal, and that might even be too high, maybe it's 5 or 7 pounds or something, and Hollywood kicks me out because I'm no longer fit the mold they want, fuck them, I don't care.
Mm-hmm. And then so the last thing, because I know that you have to do something right after this, the one question that I had, I wanted to ask this on the podcast, but we weren't able to get to it. Is there any reason why, at least, and this might be just my perception, but it seems like you've been a lot more open and talked a lot more about weight loss? Because we kind of talked about it on the podcast that you've lost weight in the past a couple times. You've even had like loose skin surgery, so you lost a lot of weight in the past and then you gained it back. Like, is there a reason why this time you're like, I want to make a podcast all about this and like really talk about this?
I actually, for the first time in my life, liked the way I looked, and I was comfortable. Like, I took a picture of myself at the gym and I thought, oh, I'm like right there. Like, I know I'm nitpicking now, I want to see some veins in my stomach, but I can see abs. Like, holy shit, and I did like a little pat on my back. Simultaneously, Kevin Connolly, who you met, started this podcasting company, and him and I have had a lot of political and philosophical talks, and he was like, you have to come in and do a podcast. And I said, no way. I don't want to say a single word in that arena publicly because you're gonna lose. You're gonna piss somebody off.
Yeah.
Well, as you've learned and I've learned, you're gonna piss somebody off no matter what you say. Pretty much nothing's safe. But he kept asking me, and I kind of kept going, no, there's nothing I feel comfortable talking about. And then I realized, oh, I'm actually, the thing I wind up talking to people about most now is diets and weight loss and stuff. Almost everybody I run into wants to talk about that. And I look at people and I go, you're thin, what are you worried about a diet for? And then you realize, oh, thin people are concerned with this too. And then heavy people I talk to and they go, what did you do? I want to do what you did. And I go, well, I've done all these things, so you can do any of these things and I'll talk to you about all of these things. So it was really one day just going like, oh, I'm actually comfortable with myself now, which I haven't ever been. I have never looked at myself before and felt a sense of pride or felt like I've achieved some physical purpose I set out as. The first time I got on a road bike and went for a long ride, I felt like I accomplished something. And then there was a news story that kind of belittled it and just talked about the downsides of weight loss, which we talked about on the podcast. And it made me feel shitty, and it kind of inhibited me from talking about physically what I'd done. At the time, I was riding 300 to 400 miles a week on a bike, and I could have talked at length about cycling. I was super interested in cycling, but I wasn't necessarily comfortable with myself physically. And I think so the difference is I'm now at a place where I don't feel like taking my shirt off. I have so much respect for you to do that you did that. And I'm a little bit jealous of your comfort level. But like me with a shirt on, I look at a picture and I feel a sense of accomplishment, which I hadn't ever really felt before.
Mm-hmm. Awesome, man. Well, thanks for taking the time.
Yeah, thank you for coming.
Yeah,
thank
absolutely.
you.
So there you guys go. That is the episode with Ethan. Again, huge thank you to him for agreeing to record that with me and for having me on his podcast. If you guys have any ideas or any suggestions of episodes that you guys would like to listen to, or ideas or topics that you would like to hear, make sure that you go, either if you're watching this on YouTube, go to the YouTube video and leave a comment. But if you're not, if you want somewhere to comment, go to the Instagram Work for Change the podcast and leave us a comment on, I'm sure I'll put a picture up of this episode once it comes out. Leave a comment of something that you would like to hear, right? Something you would like us to talk about, or someone you would like us to have on, whether it's about the virus or not. If you guys want to escape from that, I understand. So just let us know, because obviously right now everyone is talking about this, and again, for good reason. But if you guys want something different, I understand that. But if you want to talk about the virus, I also understand that. So just let us know. Thank you guys so much for listening, and I'll see you next time.